Hey guys, I got a Plant Synchro deck here for you that I wanted to show off. I've been trying to get into more retro formats as I enjoy modern Yu-Gi-Oh less and less. I mean, I still play a good chunk of modern Yu-Gi-Oh like more than oftentimes a week, but I recently, well, not recently, I would say about maybe like a year or so ago. Over once like the pandemic began, I started picking up older formats because modern Yu-Gi-Oh events there wasn't really anything going on. So I got in a GOAT format, and that was like really cool, and that was like a really cool experience. And I built like tons of decks in that, and I was having so much fun. And then I don't know, after a while, it started to get a little too predictable and a little bit like maybe too solved. Where like now some of the best decks are like burn decks and things like that. So it's like not as cool as it once was, but it's still a really solid format. So now I'm just like kind of experimenting with other formats. So first one was Plant Synchro, which I was recommended by a friend, and I was just like, well, I looked at it, and the first thing I looked at, I was like, well, this seems kind of too similar to Go. But then I like took a second look at it and actually tried it, and I was like, holy crap, this is actually like probably the ideal format that's a mix between modern and old Yu-Gi-Oh. Like it has all the old parts of Yu-Gi-Oh where like traps are still relevant, the game is still very slow, OTKs aren't very prevalent, but it also has like hand traps, so you have more player interaction, and then you also have battle traps. You also have like you can't just like like have your board cleared and then you just die. So it's like there's lots of like points of interactions in this format. And one thing that's cool is there's like no like set like plays that you want to do. So like in Goat Control Mirrors, it was always like set up Magician of Faith, loop Pot of Greed or whatever, and then have Tsukiyomi keep looping your Magician of Faith with that. So like that was like a go-to play. Otherwise, you're gonna set up like your Thousand Eyes Restrict and keep them from like using their flip effects and such. And it just usually becomes a battle of like Tsukiyomis and stuff. So this format is a little bit different in that like you have a lot more explosive plays because now you have access to synchros, which in Goats was like you only had access to the extra deck via Metamorphosis. So that was kind of like, I mean, Metamorphosis is a very cool, fun card and things that you could do with it, but it was also like you could only access the extra deck when you had that card. Where in Plant Synchro now you have like some XYZs and a whole like utility of like synchros. So that's really cool, and it gives you way more play options. And like just based on what resources you have, you can like just do tons of plays, or sometimes just small pushes. And Edison is another format that's probably the second most popular format behind Goats. And that format, I took a quick look at it, and it wasn't really what I was looking for because it felt too similar to Goats. Whereas like there's still basically no hand traps. Like the only hand trap that is legal is like DD Crow really. And I wanted a format where I could play like Valor at least. And this format has both Valor and Maxi and DD Crow, so it's like you get like at least a good chunk of like hand traps that are even still relevant today. Even technically Droll and Lockbird, although it's not really played. And then I was just like looking at it, and they're just like I was missing like I wanted more tuners, like the good notable tuners, which is Glow Bulb and Spore, which are legal in this format at one, but not legal in Edison yet. So I was just like, let's pick a format that actually like is like truly like for synchro summoning, but also like still pretty much old pace Yu-Gi-Oh. So to start off, obviously we have the plant engine. We have the one Lone Fire, the one Dandelion, the one Spore, and the one Glow Up. So these first two were already legal in Edison. I think they're both at 2 copies per in Edison, but they're at 1 copies in this format, and then you have the 1 copies of each of these. And these are like the main plants. You don't play any other plants. There's not really any other plants you would want to play. You could do like a Giga Plant variant, but honestly, like just sticking to these is fine. So this is just a normal Tengu plant build. I basically mirrored it over after Billy Breaks topping deck list, and then kind of added a few things and kind of like modded a few things, so I didn't have to have like have a side deck because this is more just for casual play. So these are the 4, and then obviously since Tengu plants, you got to play the 3 Tengus. It's just like basically the first guy that actually just like floats when he leaves the field, and since it's mandatory, you can like pretty much just sank him off and then or tribute him off and then keep getting effects with them and bringing them back. So Plant Synchro is broken into 2 parts that I do want to mention, and this ties into basically Sangan as well. Is at the beginning of Plant Synchro when XYZs were first announced, is that when monsters were detached, they were considered being sent from the field to the grave. And that was like around like March 2011 until like I think it was maybe until like June, I think is when they changed that. So the real format I think is used as a September list, and it's more based on like YCS Columbus and YCS Toronto. I think YCS Toronto was in August, and YCS Columbus was like the last like event of Plant Synchro where Billy Break won both of those events, and that was like that was pretty much the last event in Plant Synchro, and then Photon Shockwave came out, which ushered in ushered in Rescue Rabbit, or or basically Dino Rabbits, which this deck still like still existed until like March of 2012, but it was no longer the best deck. So it's still technically playable under that like format, but there wasn't like any like real, I think, at least not like any like noted events that I could like find from like that small period of time from like November to like February. So this was basically the height of the format is like October 2011. And so these guys would not get there, at least the way I play it, and they should be played as in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is monsters being detached aren't being sent from the field of grave. So if you like detached for Utopia, you would not get this effect. But if you played like let's say the March version with the March list, then you would, which is just so wacky because that was such a small part of time in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. And then obviously we played the 3 tour guides. Tour guide was at 3, and at the time was a very expensive card for good reasons. It's basically just a 1 card rank 3, which there wasn't like many rank 3s at the time. I think there was like Granosaurus, Leviathan, Levier, and I think that's basically about it. And then next, and Photon Shockwave is what introduced like Zenmain, so then you got like a really good rank 3. And then of course the one Songun. So people when they usually see this, they think like, oh, you can just detach get the Songun effect. Like why even playing Songun? Well, there's a reason for this. So like, let's say you're going first and you normally summon Tour Guide, you get Max Seed, you get someone out Songun, and Songun is just always a good card. He searches so many things in the deck, and it has always been a really good card. And he's basically just free like tribute fodder for any effects, so like Caius or any controller, or blow it up with like Torrential, things like that. And then he searches and searches you into like either a hand trap or another extender or a starter or whatever you need. Like this card does everything. So that's like the thing. You're never going to overlay with this card unless you really need to. But it's basically one of these is going to make like an XYZ, and another one's going to summon out the Songun to have you just set that free search. And Songun is obviously a huge deal in GOATs as well, because people play like Mystic Tomato to get to him, things like that. And then the last, like, he's like the plant card. He was at 2, I think, 2 in Edison, and he's at 1 in this format. He's also at 2 at the beginning of, I think him and Lone Fire at 2 at the beginning of Plant Synchro, and then they go to 1 on the September list. And he's really cool. He's just basically really good access to any, like, basically Synchro 7. Depending on what things you had, you can also make like a Synchro 6 or even like a Synchro 9. So like you have Brio, Trish, maybe not Brio. I think Brio's not a dragon actually. No, I double check. Yeah, not Brio. It has to be like Orient Dragon. Brio's a Sea Serpent. But Trishula, Black Rose, Ancient Fairy, things like that. So he's really cool. And then Thunder King Ryle, which he basically for a majority of like his existence, he was always just like a really like staple like 2 or 3 of. Until he started getting hit. Because this card's like Mistake on Legs, 1900, Light, and he can negate an Inherent Summon, or someone without an effect. So, like, he just does it all. Like, this card, like, you established him, like, they have to either bait it out by going into, like, a Synchro and XYZ summon, which basically makes them neg 1 and you just negate the summon, or, like, they're forced to, like, out it by other means and use resources that way. So this card is always just, like, really good and really powerful. And then for the tribute summons, this is basically the best monarch of its time, is Caius. Basically just, banish any card on the field targeting, and then if it's a dark, deal 1,000. So, like, really good. He's basically, like, also like kind of like a pseudo Ring of Destruction, where if they're at least 1,000 or less and you summon this, you can target himself and burn for 1,000 per game. Really powerful spot removal. Banishing is always really good, like, always really good. Especially in a format where, like, Stardust is sometimes prioritized, so banishing is really good. Bouncing is really good. Destroying's subpar, so he's just really powerful. And then for the hand trap lineup, it's just 2 effect veilers. 3 is like could be played, but usually 1 is sided per se, and then of course like 2 or 3 maxis. I do 3 just because I like to see it, and if I like don't need it's better to like to have it and not need it than need it not have it. So that's my theory with maxi. I started playing in 2013, so I'm very well aware of like the potentials of Maxi. But funny enough, in this format, Maxi's not like the end all be all. Normally, you're usually just trading 1 card with this, because they'll activate like Tour Guide, or they'll activate like 1 for 1, or Foolish and Dandy, and then you can chain Maxi, and they'll pretty much end their turn. But you got 1 draw of it. So sometimes the better use is to hold it for when they have to, or they like forced to actually like answer your board, or they lose. Like let's say they're at low life points and they're going to die next turn, then they have to start making pushes, and that's where Maxi is like really good to put the pressure on. But overall, that's really not that like big of a threat in this format, because it's very easy to play around, especially in the early game. And then Battle Hand Traps, which is like really cool. Gores is obviously like the main one. I think he was at 1 for a lot of his like existence, and then Tragodia, which was at 2 for a lot of his existence. These guys like basically make sure that like even if your monster board gets cleared, you're not dying that turn. And like Gores is like really good because like it forces people to play around it, And honestly, in my opinion, if Gores is in the format, it's a good format. Like, he's just a really good indicator of how far Yu-Gi-Oh has come. And even like people today will like make jokes about Gores, but like very well known, no one in their mind would ever play this in modern Yu-Gi-Oh. I don't even think it's. I think it stopped getting played after like maybe like late 2012, early 2013, if I had to guess. Like I said, I started playing like mid 2013, and by that point, people really weren't playing Gores. So there's that first respect. And then Trigodia is just really cool because he has so many useful effects. Like you can discard a monster with a level and target one of theirs with the same level and take it permanently. And then he can also target one monster in your graveyard and copy its effect, copy its level into the end phase. So basically, you can like steal like, like this is even an example. You can like discard an 8, take their BLS, and then like, that's insane, and it keeps it forever. Or you can like take one of their guys and make a rank, and then like target a 4 in your grave and make a Utopia with it. You can do like synchro plays with it, like modulate to any level you need based on what's in your graveyard. So he's just a really fun, like cool card, and he wasn't really played too much in some lists, like in Tengu Plant, than the lists I saw, especially not in Billy Breaks, but I just really enjoy this card of like what he offers. And of course, just the one BLS, because he came to one on the September list, and he's like basically the same as he is here as he is in Goats. You drop him, and you're in a pretty good spot, because this card is just nuts. Which, funny enough, in Modern Yu-Gi-Oh, he's just like a brick, and he's at 3, and nobody even plays it. But I mean, I wouldn't. But man, back in the day, he was the king of his time. So that's the monster lineup. Oops. And then for spells, either are the only ones I play multiples of. It's 2 MST and 2 enemy controller. So honestly, like either of these could be at 3. I think Billy Bricks sided 3 and maybe sided like a 3rd MST. I just really enjoy this card in the main deck. And like again, I'm playing like a non-sided like with my friends at the moment. If I was gonna, I'd still main these. I might even consider maining 3 because this card has so many uses with like Tengu, with Sangan, Dandelion, scapegoat tokens, like dodging targeting effects. Like this card does so much. Such a very fun card, and it's something you don't like always see in modern Yu-Gi-Oh anymore. But like, man, back in the day, this card had so much utility and value, and it's kind of like a, in some sense, it's usually like either like a neg 1 or a neg 2, but like it's one of the best ones for it. Like Book of Moon is usually known as like the best neg 1. This might be like known as one of the best neg 2s per se, but usually it more often becomes a neg 1 if you use it on your turn, because then you can take that monster, attack with it, do some things, and you can even sync or XYZ with it. So you recoup some of the cost of the card. And of course, it has like the little like switch to defense effect, which is sometimes come up if you're trying not to die. For board wipes, 1 dark hole and 1 heavy. They're both at 1 in this format, which is really nice because in like Goats, you only have the 1 heavy, but never had the dark hole. Only like lightning vortex. And I really enjoy having both of one of these because it's like they're expected, and they're not like super crazy game breaking, but they are still what they are, and they're still good and sort of known to be playing around. Still enjoy these cards. And then like we have like what 3 dark hole in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, and it doesn't barely sees play, and we have Harpy's Feather Duster but no Heavy Storm, which is fine. Basically they achieve the same process, so it's kind of cool to have that, but I don't know. And then for more one-ofs, these are all cards at 1 anyways, deservedly right. Scapegoat tokens, like in this format, they're great in Goats because you can use them for tribute fodder for like Metamorphosis, even enemy controller, because that's in that format, I believe, and some other fringe effects, but realistically it's usually just used for Metamorphosis or protecting your life points. But in this format you can synchro with them, which is even cooler. You get more uses out of them. 1 Book of Moon, which is sad. I kind of bummed that this card had gone to 1 for a majority of its like existence, and honestly, like I feel like it could have stayed at 3 for like all of its existence. It was never like busted in my mind. It's just a very good utility card. And then 1 Mind Control. This card's nuts. This card deserved to be at 1. This card is like, especially with synchros, is like I'm gonna take like one of your monsters and either overlay with it or sync with it, and whatnot. So like, in Goats, this card was like fine, even because it was at 3, but like you can't tribute or attack with the monster you take. So back in Goats, it's like, well, that's really all I can do with it. You can take like a flip monster and flip like their Faith, and then like add back a Pot of Greed or maybe this card or back whatever you have in there. And that's about it, but like, or just take an attacker off their field, realistically. But like in this format, it has so many more uses. Whew. And then we have the 1 Avarice, which this card was at 3 in Edison, which is just crazy to me. Because that card, like, this card, especially back in the day, was like pretty nuts. And even in this format, it's nuts. It's at 1. I think it's at 2 in the first part of Plant Synchro, but it's at 1 in the second part. And then just a really good card. Really cool, like top deck. Recycle your Tengus and like what have you, and then just go crazy again. And then 1 Foolish, starter / extender, send like Dandelion, Glow Up, Spore, whatever you need really, all the plants. Monster Reborn, really nice extender, and then the 1/1 for 1. Of course, gets you to your Spore or your Glow Up, or even a Veiler if you need it. Really cool, just cards. Start, I don't know. But and then for traps, so like there's not too many traps that were played at this point, but the ones that were very powerful. Torrential was at 1, very powerful card, always has been. Even is now making it, it's like now people will play 3 in some decks in Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it's just that good. 2 warnings. It was at 2 in this format, and man, negating a person's normal summon is freaking huge. And like it sets them back a turn, and then gets you like back like swinging tempo back to you. And then just 1 judgment because it's at 1 in this format, which I think these are fine. Like I'm also trying out hat format, so I might have a list for that later sometime. I don't know. We're messing around with that. But these cards, like in this format, it feels fine. They also feel very powerful. In hat format, judgment's banned and warning's at 1, so it's like almost like it doesn't feel like you really have any like negate summon trap cards in that format, which is almost fine because sometimes I prefer that because you're have more points of interaction then, and then not just like straight up like just negating your opponent's turn, because usually it's all based on the normal summon. So like plants is like, it's very normal summon reliant, but once you get the plants and stuff going in the graveyard, then you can do some really cool stuff. And then I played 2 Call the Haunted. This was played in and out of some lists, especially in Billy's. I think he played it in 1 in his Toronto, and 0 in his Columbus, and I had just been playing it 2. I'm a little bit over 40 cards because again I'm just messing around. It's more fun, and I just like having more options, and the game goes on forever anyway, so it's usually not a big deal. And like again, there's like no set like play, so I'm like I'm not trying to see a very specific card going first. I mean, if I had to choose, it'd probably be like Tour Guide or Thunder King Ryle, maybe even Lone Fire into like a Dandy. Like that's usually a pretty good setup start. This card is just really good for you can use it to like, let's say you negate something with Ryo, and then they try to use a search effect or something, you can chain, bring back the Ryo, and then stop the search. Or if you want to stop more summons, like that's really cool. Of course, just bringing back any of your monsters for Synchro XYZ plays is cool. And then of course this card's like, it works really weird with Synchros and XYZ, so basically it's stuck on the field, and then at that point it kind of like eats a zona, and you're so like, it kind of screws the scores. But you can also bounce it back with Brionac, because Brionac pre-errata could bounce back your own cards as well, so then you get the multiple use out of Call of the Haunteds. So that's the main deck. I think it's like 45, something like that. I don't know. Like I said, just messing around. I really thought about like trying to like cut it to 40, because I've never like in these like older retro formats, it's usually like not like, that's not usually what I'm all about, unless it's like some weird like combo deck that I need to see specific cards. Then of course, I'll try to focus on 40, as I do like Modern Yu-Gi-Oh. So extra deck we have for XYZs, these are like the very few ones we have. For rank 3s, these are like basically the only good ones. Granosaurus is fine too, but no one really played it. Leviair, really good later in the game when you've like already used like Spores effect, or if you had like something banished off like by Caius, or you banished something with BLS, like that's where he comes into play, and he's really good. And he summons from either player's banished too, so you can like summon from their banished and use something from theirs for more XYZs or more Synchro plays. And then Leviathan, he's just really cool for he's just a 2500 beast deck that can become a 3000 beast deck but can't attack directly. So he's just really cool, and he's, since with Tour Guide's a 1 card like 2500 attacker, like that's really cool. Like I mean, back in the day, like it doesn't sound like much, it actually was. And then the other 2 XYZs is just the 1 Utopia, which surprisingly this is like probably one of the few formats where he's actually relevant for just like his stats, his attribute, and his effect alone. Because like stopping attacks is nice. Lights is very relevant. There's not many lights in the Tengu plant deck outside of like Veiler or the extra deck cards, so like, he's one of those options. Plus he just works really cool in the Astro Rare. And then Steel Swarm Roach. Steel Swarm Roach is another option if you feel like if you're playing against like a deck that summons, like let's say they're going to be summoning big like Synchro monsters, or you're playing maybe against like Light Swarms or someone like Judgment Dragon, or maybe some variant that's going to summon Dad. That's where this card's really good because it negates 5 or higher special summon, so he's really cool for that. Those are really the only XYZs you go into. Usually the 3s are more obviously going to be made more just because of Tour Guide. The 4s are like situational. And then now onto the Synchros. We have the 1 formula. It was at 1. Card is really cool. Of course, you can like, I mean, obviously drawing or going up the chain with Synchroing, or you can Synchro someone on your opponent's turn into like a Black Rose. That's really common and really cool. The 1 Armory Arm in this, I think it got a new print in August, which basically changed the ruling of Armory Arm Colossal Fighter, so you couldn't just like basically like FTK them with a Colossal Fighter Armory Arm. You had to have 2 Colossal Fighters, because I made it so I had to check the attack in the graveyard. Of the monster of the graveyard, and the Colossal would summon itself, and then it'd like lose the target for the attack. So you had to have 2. So that's not a thing that really comes up anymore, but it's still just good like to have a Synchro 4 option, and then also like another attacker or equip, and then do some like burn damage. 1 Catastor. This card's like actually pretty cool in this format. There is a good number of darks, but for like decks that aren't Tengu plant, they don't play a lot of darks. So like let's say they're just a different attribute deck in general. This card's actually a really problem for them to deal with. And of course the one TG LeBaron, he's at 1 for obvious reasons. You can draw every time you Synchro Summon, or every time your opponent Synchro Summons as well. So he's a really good threat just even leave on your board, because it's like, okay, if you're playing the mirror and they want to make Synchro plays, it's like, you got to either answer this or give me free draws. And this combined with the Maxi is like even scarier. One Orient, he's just a Sacro 6 option. He's usually sometimes the most cuttable, but he's very nice answer to cards like Stardust and Catastor. Just banishing a Synchro monster. And he has like decent stats, 2300 attack. That's not like horrible. So, and he's usually 6s are pretty easy to make. So he's an option, especially with the Breeze Dragon. Summon back at any level 2 and then make this. And then of course the one Brienne. This card got banned for a good period of time and eroded for a good reason. I mean, you can not once per turn discard any number of cards. You can do it like multiple times per turn, one at a time per se if you want to play around Baylor or whatever, and bounce any card on the field. It does target, but it doesn't really say it. Of course, PSCT was not very prevalent with a lot of these cards. PSCT started around, I think, like, 2011? So some of these cards in their time frame did have PSCT, but a lot of them did not. Briannock being one of those. But, man, this card's crazy. And plus, and another thing is that this format had priority. So you could, like, summon this and then priority like discard cards and then bounce like their field back, and that's crazy. And then if they have like Baylor or something, you can chain like an econ tribute it off to dodge the target. So that's really cool. And then we have, of course, the 7s is the one Black Rose and the one Ancient Fairy. Ancient Fairy is just like another one to make if you don't want to waste your Black Rose, or if you want to like extend, you can summon one from your hand of 4 or less, but you lose your battle phase. So sometimes that kind of sucks. This is just more of an option. The field spell effect really doesn't come up unless you're playing a specific deck. But again, they're just both really nice. And obviously Black Rose, boom the field is always really cool, and it's actually relevant. And then for 8s, we have the one Stardust and the one Scrap. Stardust is just usually just really good in general. Plays around any like destruction effect and coming back every turn. Decent stats. Scrap Dragon's really nice for just outing any problem card. It has really good high attack, 2800, and it could pop again with priority. Very nice as well. And then, of course, the king himself, Trishula. I really enjoy summoning this card. It just feels so good. Because, I mean, he takes 3 monsters to make, so you got to get value out of him, obviously. And he, banishing a non-targeting from 3 areas, especially for this time frame, super good. I mean, even in, like, let's say, like the Necros Trish, that was really good. But this one's, like, that doesn't matter. Like, they could have no cards in their field. You could still banish from hand and grave, or vice versa with whatever location. So, really cool. That's the extra deck. I don't have a side deck or anything. I mean, cards, that you could play if you were doing a side deck would be like maybe like DD Crow, Light Imprisoning Mirror, Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. Those are always very popular for their day. That's about I could really think off the top of my head without wasting too much time. But I mean, the deck's pretty. I mean, I've did some time and some money and some trades and whatnot to kind of make it pretty shiny to show it off. And I really enjoy like shiny cardboard. And the deck just looks so pretty, and like I think everything can come foil. Everything can almost all come like very low rarity. I do have a low rarity Tengu plant that's almost like I think the main deck is all like base rare or less. And then the extra deck, there's like a few cards that come foil, but I mean that's not a big deal. They're pretty like a couple dollars anyways, and that's like really cool. So it is a very budget format, very cool. If anyone has any questions about it, about the format or anything, I have like a lot of information about it, about like the ban list, the card pool, like niche rulings, because I've been doing a lot of research on the format. I've been enjoying it a lot. My friends have been playing some. I have a friend that has like Light Sworns, and the one has like 6 Sams. I have a Karakuri deck as well, built as well. It just like synchro spams. It's really cool. That's really all I got for you guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and just enjoyed the really beautiful cards because they're just so good to look at. And see ya. Bye.